Welcome to the Madison Miller podcast. Second guest of the evening. Covers a lot of things. He covers the Knicks for Sports Illustrated. He is a WNBA expert. He's worked for several different WNBA sites and whatnot. Mr. Geoff Magliocchetti, how are you doing on this fine Thursday evening?
Miss Madison Miller, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on again. Always a good time with you.
Always a good time. That's right. The WNBA starts tomorrow officially. A ton of big storylines, but the biggest storyline to me in the WNBA as we speak right now is the situation going on in Las Vegas with the Aces. They get snapped of their draft pick in 2025. Becky Hammon suspended for 2 games. Give us your take on this Aces situation, and do you think it's going to affect them this season?
Now, look, knowing what we know about Las Vegas, I mean, from an on-court perspective, this probably shouldn't. And it's probably the one reason why right now that Vegas would be favored over the Liberty at this point in time, if only because, chemistry is important. And, we can talk hour after hour about what the Liberty have done this season. I know I have many times, but and undoubtedly, I feel like the Liberty should be able to get things right quickly. But I think in terms of on-court chemistry, that's really going to be important for Vegas. They're familiar with each other. Most of them won a championship together. But unfortunately, the missing part of that, of course, is Jerica Hamby. And the real unfortunate part of this is because this comes at a bit of a boom for women's basketball at this point in time. We just came off one of the most watched, one of the more exciting NCAA women's basketball tournaments that we've seen in years. The W itself is enjoying a bit of an uptick right now. You're seeing a lot of you're seeing their message spread more and more. Not just their message, it's more their exposure at this point. How many times have we seen those, CarMax ads with Candace Parker speaking of Vegas and Sue Bird joining the NBA guys? But for example, but the thing is about Vegas, it's just unfortunate to see is because Vegas appeared to be, one of the teams they really seemed to get it right in terms of their team, because relocation and or disassociation from a quote-unquote NBA brother seems to be a bit of a death knell for most teams in this league, and that's exactly what seemed to happen with Vegas. Like they broke away from the Spurs. They were the Silver Stars, then the Stars. They broke away from San Antonio and went over. No, wait a minute, I'm wrong about that. Yes, they were the Silver Stars. I apologize. Yeah, they were Silver Stars, broke away from San Antonio, go over to Vegas. That's a death knell for most teams. We've seen it with so many teams, the Charlotte Sting, the Miami Soul, heck, even the mighty Houston Comets weren't immune to that. So I feel that Vegas really dug themselves in, and they really started to take care of their players a little bit in the sense that, they had their own training facility. They hired the right people in here. They put themselves on the path to a championship and really took advantage of some, lean years to really push themselves forward and into the elite national conversation in terms of basketball champions. But unfortunately with this Hamby situation it's just kind of a black mark for this league in the sense that, it comes at a point where, things were trending in the right direction. And all it takes for this league in some situations, and part of that's earned, part of that's unearned, is that, one tough mark for this league, a league that's trying to, prove its legitimacy through issues both on and off the court, break through those issues. All it takes is one major one like this, because this isn't like a small chickens incident, unfortunately. This is really something that could really leave a mark on a team. And when, one of the players' mental states, one of their physical states too, is in question, it's a tough mark on this league. So what to answer the question, I apologize if I'm drawing on a bit here. To answer the question, Vegas has enough firepower and enough chemistry to kind of, weather this storm a little bit on the court, at least in terms of the standings. But in terms of the long term, in terms of the off-court ramifications, it's a tough mark for this league, undoubtedly.
I agree. It's a big deal off the court, but I think on the court they'll be okay because of the talent they have, although Hammond is going to be suspended the first 2 games. All right, the biggest story in the WNBA this offseason and over the past year is Brittney Griner. She is finally coming back. What are your expectations for her this season?
I give her all the credit in the world for coming back because, it would have been totally understandable if she kind of, took a year off, kind of gathered herself up a little bit. I mean, who knows what she's gone through? Who knows what's going on in her psyche right now? But she came back. She made a commitment. She wanted to come back. She wanted to be on the floor for this. So I feel that maybe we should curb our expectations a little bit. But at the same time, this is Brittany Griner we're talking about. Before she, even as she gets to in her 30s, as she works through kind of the latter stages of her career, she's still a dominant force in this league. And I feel that with a year off, she's going to want to make a statement. She's going to want to come back with a vengeance and whatnot. So, obviously keep things realistic, but at the same time, I feel that we should see, images, we should see glimpses of the old Brittany Griner. Again, it might take a few games for her to get back used to that again, but she really dedicated herself this offseason. She got the workouts in, she got herself into playing shape, and got herself, because how quickly we forget. It's less than a half year since her release was negotiated. It's just about 6 months at this point in time. I feel that happened in December, I believe. So I feel that, while we should keep things realistic, while we should keep things, expectations, that's the thing about athletes. We tend to forget, they're human, just like the rest of us. And who knows what she kind of went through over there. But at the same time, if we know one thing about Brittany Griner, she's going to make sure that she's in tip-top shape for what's going to be a very, very, very interesting season from her perspective.
I think it's going to be a very interesting season for her and for her team as well. The New York Liberty made some monster moves this offseason, most notably signing Brianna Stewart from the Seattle Storm. I think this is a big season for the Liberty. Expectations all of a sudden. What are your takes on the Liberty and their chances of actually hoisting a trophy?
I think the good thing for the Liberty is they hired the right people to kind of. This is why Sandy Brondello was hired. This is why you bring in a championship mind. She, of course, had a very strong team in Phoenix a couple years back and really rolled that to the title. So this is what New York has been building towards. This is what they brought in, so many of these faces for. And this is why, Sabrina Ionescu went number one. This is why they opted to keep an all-star like Benijah Laney, despite, her only playing 9 games last season. But one thing the Liberty has done, they have surrounded this so-called super team with a lot of right names to help them succeed. And all that matters is how fast can they get it together, because not only are they going to be playing their first regular season games together, some of them missed the off-season preparation. Stewart, for example, she had a really loaded season in Europe. It took her a couple weeks to kind of finally get back on her feet, and her first time on the Liberty practice court was last week. She did partake in the preseason game on Saturday. Box score left a little something to be desired. I'm sure she'll be the first to say that. But at the same time, it's all going to be about the chemistry. Courtney Vandersloot has spent most of training camp in concussion protocols, so we'll see how that works out in her favor. Jonquil Jones, she likewise made her debut on Saturday in Vegas. So I feel that this is going to be very telling for Sandy Brondello's basketball legacy. One thing I think we should keep an eye on in the early going for New York, I feel that they're going to have to win a lot of defensive struggles early, because, there's going to be a lot of, getting your professional footing back, getting back into the swing of things. They're going to have to get things right on the defensive end. And I think that's one of the reasons they kept Niara Sabally, their number 5 pick from the 2022 draft. And the reason that would be shocking is because we've seen so many rookies. We've seen so many prospects from so many recent drafts they end up on the free agent front, and that was really personified with the release of 2021's number 1 pick, Charlie Collier, who was released from the Dallas Wings earlier this week. That's another conversation entirely. It's both a blessing and a curse, the talent shift we've seen at the collegiate basketball level. There's so many strong talents that you're finding not just fighting in the top 5 of the draft anymore, that the 12-team system isn't sustainable. But that's a whole other conversation for another day. But about the Liberty, I think they're really going to have to rely on defense a little bit. That's why you see players like Jocelyn Willoughby was kept on the team. Jocelyn Willoughby, of course, could still end up proving to be the steal of the draft. You don't want to call her a bust by any stretch of the imagination because she has dealt with injuries over the past 2 years. She's been on the team for 4 years now, but has only played in 33 games. She had knee issues last season, missed the entire 2021 season due to a torn Achilles. But the Liberty have done their almost. They kept players like Jocelyn Willoughby on this roster. They kept players like Niar Sabali on this roster. I think that's going to show where they stand in the early stages because they might have to win some defensive struggles while that chemistry sorts itself out. And the chemistry, of course, will be formed by the leadership group of Sandy Brondello, of Sabrina Ionescu, who is bar none now the leader of this group in the face of the Brooklyn era for this team. So I feel that it's going to be a very telling stretch for the Liberty. People always say it's not about how you start, it's where you finish. I'm very curious to see where the Liberty are able to start.
Yeah, me too. I'm very interested to see how they get started with this new mesh of players. Who's a team that you think has kind of flown under the radar this year that could catch us by surprise?
Yeah, I think Chicago should seem to keep an eye on in that regard. I feel like Chicago has kind of, their title feels like so long ago, and they've lost so many bases. They've lost Diamond DeShields. They've lost Courtney Vandersloot. They've lost Candace Parker. They've lost Ellie Quigley. But at the same time, I feel like there's enough talent, there's enough knowledge left on this team. There's enough additions who have come in, and they've really started to kind of, work well enough with the team. There's players like Courtney Williams. There's players like Marina Mabry. Marina can shoot from deep. Kalia Copper is still there, and she's now a bona fide leader of this team. So I feel like a lot of people have written off Chicago in the early going, but I think they're definitely worth keeping an eye on. You never want to count out a team that has tasted a championship so recently, especially in the tightly congested WNBA. You obviously can't count on them to be in the penthouse this year. I think that's Vegas's territory, and Vegas is to lose at this point. Obviously, the Liberty on paper should be there, but you want to see a couple games first. You want to see them actually go out there and prove it. We play these games for a reason, after all. But I think Chicago will certainly be someone to keep an eye on a little bit. I know there's a lot of hope in Indiana this year, especially with the addition of top pick Aaliyah Boston. So I feel like Chicago will really be someone. You don't want to count them out. I feel like they've seen the headlines about them. They've seen that people are kind of counting them out a little bit. But Kalia Copper has come in time and time again and has really been at the forefront of disproving those narratives. And now there's a brilliant opportunity for them to kind of take that in a massive way and really play up that storyline this time around.
Oh yeah, the Chicago Sky for sure. I remember, what was the year they won? Did they win the COVID year or the year before that?
They won. I hesitate to call it the COVID year. It was 2021, where it was like a COVID year, but not really. They won let's just say they won at a period when people were still sitting next to cardboard standees in
right.
Right. Gosh.
I thought they won it in 2020.
They were my pick in 2020, and then in 2021, I said to myself, look, I'm not going to pick the Sky. I picked the Sky for the past 3 years. I'm not going to lay that evil on them this time. I forget who I picked, but I did not pick the Sky in 2020 and 2021, and lo and behold, that's the year they win it all, of course. This is why I don't bet Madison.
Right. So we talked about championship picks and how you picked the Sky 3 years in a row, and then the year you didn't pick them, they won. So we talked about Vegas. We talked about the Liberty. Are one of those two teams your championship pick, or are you going somewhere else?
No, I feel like it's almost wrong to not go with either the Aces or Liberty at this point. I know it sounds cliche. I know it's very safe, but at the same time, these two teams haven't done anything yet to disprove why they shouldn't be the favorites. Vegas in particular, because again, with the Liberty, the whole difference is going to be how they start this season. How are they going to respond to these expectations? How are they going to respond to, having so much firepower on this roster? Because we've seen super teams crash and burn before on every level of every sport. But at the same time, I think that this is going to be a real exciting opportunity for Liberty. They have this sense of franchise stability now, and I think they really want to win. I think they were allowed to hit fast forward on this. I know we compared the rebuilds of the Knicks and Liberty a couple months back, and we compared it in the sense that the Knicks, for example, trading for Donovan Mitchell would have been unnecessarily hitting fast forward on their reboot. But the Liberty have taken their rebuilding process, and they were able to do that. Jalen Brunson was able to do it for them. Management shouldn't be the ones doing that. It's players that need to be doing that. And the interesting thing about this Liberty group is that there are players capable of doing that. The ironic part about a super team is that you're more or less only as good as your role players. And there are players who can do that on this Liberty group. For example, if you want to look at Death Stars, look no further than Kayla Thornton. You're going to have Kayla Thornton come off the bench, and she's someone who was a staple in the Dallas starting five over the past 5 years. She was there for a while, really made a name for herself after going undrafted in about 2015, and there's an opportunity for her there. We talked about Savali. We talked about you gotta wait until Marine Johannes comes back. I hesitate to call her a role player. She's almost like a trick star out there, the way she's done. But you look at what they've tried to do, and you look at what Vegas did last year. Hamby spoke for herself. You had Raquana Williams off the bench. You had Sydney Colson off the bench. You're only as good as your role players in this league. We've talked about Willoughby. We've talked about what Dee Richards was able to bring. She was actually one of the surprise releases, but we've talked about what she was able to bring last year and the past couple of years with this group. So now you have Thornton coming off the bench. You're going to have a very stacked interior with Sabali if and when she gets healthy, with Han Shu, who is really to take over a bigger part at the top of the key so far this season. You might have Steph Dolson this time around. Depends on what the starting five is going to look like. You might have John Paul Jones and Brianna Stewart starting at the posts, and at least for the time being. I don't see why you wouldn't at this point in time, provided they've adjusted well to the offense. But you're going to have a lot of former starters on this lineup coming off the bench and providing some excellent depth. It's all about depth in this league, and what Vegas and New York have built at this point in time seems very impenetrable. Now there will be contenders. I mean, you never want to mess, for example, with a full strength Elaine Deladon in Washington. That's where the Liberty will be tomorrow night. So I feel at this point in time, it'd be almost foolhardy not to consider someone other than New York or Vegas at this point. Again, long season, time will tell.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know who I'm going to pick. Maybe I'll reveal it on my regular show tomorrow. All right. Let's switch. What was that?
I said, please do. I'll be waiting.
Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow on the regular show. All right. NASCAR so far this season. Interesting in all three leagues. What jumps out to you so far in the Cup Series?
One thing I do want to point out in the Cup Series is that Alex Bowman has been docked 60 points. He was part of those Hendricks bullies. He's missed each of the last 2 or 3 races, and yet he's only 5 points out of a playoff spot. So I think he and the 48 team deserve a lot of credit there. I think some further credit belongs to Josh Berry filling in for those Hendrick guys. First filling in for Chase Elliott, and later filling in for Bowman. Elliott too, as a matter of fact, I feel that, you look at his ledger, 4 top 10s and 7 appearances so far, missed 6 races due to the leg injury he suffered snowboarding. This won't stop him by any stretch of the imagination, but the rate he's racing, he might be able to make the playoffs without a win at this point. It depends on how the standings go, depending on how the point standings go, but I give him a lot of credit there. But obviously the headline in NASCAR right now has to be Ross Chastain and his sense of aggressiveness. Ross Chastain is bona fide NASCAR's villain right now. It seems like no race is complete without Chastain getting into the back of somebody. And, but what's interesting about Chastain is that he's different from so-called other NASCAR so-called villains. And the reason for that is, in my opinion anyway, is that he's taken a long journey to get into the race. He had to earn his chances with so many small teams, Nice Motorsports, he had to Colleague Racing, really help put them on the map in the Xfinity Series. So he's had to earn his ride. And also he does genuinely seem apologetic when he gets into these guys a little bit. I know he talked to the Hendrick guys he got into this week. He talked to Noah Gragson a little bit. So it's really interesting to see. But now, will all this aggressiveness kind of cost him a title at this point in time? He's turning himself into a villain a little bit, but the fact remains, he's remained consistent, but is his aggressiveness starting to cost him wins? Because you look at the lap leaders this year. Chastain is fourth at 337. He's won 5 stages, and he leads the point standings by 25, but still, this point system values wins more and more, and that's what's going to make William Byron, who's won 3 races this year, particularly dangerous come playoff time. So, and Kyle Larson, who's won 2 more. So, I feel that there's a lot of eyes on Ross Chastain at this point in time, and that's only going to get bigger as we push forward in this season. Will he be able to keep that lead in the points? I think he's fully capable, but I think a question has to be asked. Is his unique style of aggressive driving going to cost him at any point?
I would agree with that. Yeah, Ross Chastain, great start to the season, and even Byron has been amazing. I think William Byron's been very impressive as well. Who's a guy you think's been a little disappointing so far in Cup?
Honestly, you could make several cases at this point right now. My personal choice would probably be Eric Jones. Legacy Motorsports, Legacy Motor Club, formerly Richard Petty Motorsports. They really kind of made a name for themselves last year. I know they still had the 42 car, which has kind of suffered a little bit. Ty Dillon struggled there last year. Noah Gregson's been having a little trouble in that 42. The car is here as a rookie. And it's tough to see what Eric Jones has gone through this year. Only 2 top 10s through the first 13 races so far. And he was he really struck me as a driver to watch, especially after he won last year's playoff race, kind of crashed the playoff party a little bit at Darlington. So it's been disappointing to see what he's had to go through early on. And, we're slowly inching towards a point of no return. We're slowly inching towards a point where we might have to have a conversation about Austin Dillon, or at least Richard Childress Racing might have to. Because the excuses that, RCR is kind of on the downtrend, those are all eliminated when Kyle Busch is continuing to be Kyle Busch in his car. Again, it's probably nowhere near where Kyle Busch wants to be, but at the same time, you can't have him running consistently in the top 10. You can't have him winning races, and meanwhile, Austin Dillon is struggling to stay in the top 30 in points. So, and only leading, I think it's 3 laps this year. So it's a really tough look, especially for someone, driving the 3 car. Now, I feel like one of the biggest myths in NASCAR is that, Dillon kind of used nepotism to earn that role. Okay, maybe he played a tiny role, but he was a very talented driver on both the truck and the Xfinity circuits. And we've seen him, have these brief flashes of brilliance at the Cup level. I think as recently as last year, I was putting him in my final 8. But right now, this is not a good look for that group out there. And you can only say RCR's been on a downtrend. The Chevrolets have been on a downtrend for so long. This is a tough look for that 3 group. At some point, RCR might have to have an awkward, uncomfortable conversation with him.
I would have to agree with that. And Kyle Busch, very non-Kyle Busch-like. I mean, he did win the second race on the season, but he's kind of been very up and down. I was going to make a case for him for disappointing driver. But on the flip side, someone that's been surprising, I'd say is Bubba Wallace. I think Bubba Wallace has been pretty decent this year, believe it or not.
He has been. He's making one of the quieter playoff cases I've seen. I looked at the standings. I was like, oh my goodness, Bubba Wallace is not only in the playoffs, but in there by a healthy margin, because he's been real quiet so far. But that's probably a good thing. One of the best things you could say about Matt, you could say about a driver, is that he takes care of the car. Take care of the car will take care of you. And Wallace has done that in the early going. He has, stayed out of trouble. Of course, pit road sometimes still is his issue, but that's not his. That's on the 23 team as a whole. For better or worse, NASCAR is a team sport, so he's really done well in that regard. So I feel like a win is coming for that 23 group. And they're at a point where 2311 no longer has to kind of steal Daytona or steal Talladega like we saw we saw Ricky Stenhouse do at the start of the season.
That's right.
They no longer had to rely on that. Wallace is capable of winning races. We saw him dominate the Fall Kansas event last year. And some tried to say, I know 2311 made it clear that this was not the case. Some try to say, okay, he's driving Kurt Busch's car. Of course, he's going to look much better. But he's really making a name for himself out there and has done a solid job this year. He's staying out of trouble in the early going, and I feel that's like one of the best things you can ask for from guys circuits this year. And I do want to give some shout outs to other guys I see in the standings. I want to give shout out to Todd Gilliland, who was mustered 3 top 10s in the 38 Ford. It's kind of messed up what Front Row did to him. Saying like, okay, look, we're going to keep you in the 38, but we're going to have Zane Smith run some rides this year. But he's again stayed out of trouble in that 38. Make sure it's running at the finish. Good for him. You also have to give some credit, I think, to Corey LaJoie, who has it seems like such a small stat, but he's 4th in laps run this season. And
wow.
I think that's really telling. He's only behind Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, and Ross Chastain. So LaJoie has run more laps than Truex, run more laps than guys like Keselowski, guys like Kevin Harvick, guys like William Byron. That's very interesting to me. So I really think those guys on the smaller level deserve some credit too. But definitely you can make a case for Wallace being a strong, surprising driver. Again, especially with the way he started the season, I don't think many would expect him to have a solid 31-point cushion on the playoffs come the All-Star break.
Yeah, that's amazing for him with the All-Star break coming up. Let's go to Xfinity really quick. Something that jumped out at me, how good Austin Hill started the season. I saw him win at Daytona, and then he won again at Vegas, and he's kind of fallen off. What happened to Austin Hill?
Yeah, it's tough to say what's going on with that car. I think someone who's fallen off even further is Riley Herbst. Who started the year with 6 top 10 finishes. It got to a point where I was like, hey, here's an idea. Let's put Riley Herbst in Kevin Harvick's car next year. But unfortunately, he's running into some issues. We saw what happened to Darlington. I think he was the first guy to get a stripe over Darlington, so things have been tough there. I don't think it's so much as Austin Hill's been suffering. I think it's more that several other drivers have kind of stepped up in comparison. John Hunter Nemechek, for example. I mean, you saw last week on Saturday how exciting was that finish. J.H. Nemechek, John Hunter holding his own against the great Kyle Larson. So I feel it's more, guys are kind of like stepping up a little bit. Josh Berry kind of using the moment. No wins yet for Josh Berry over Junior Motorsports' 8, but he's kind of using the momentum of some solid cup runs to help him out a little bit. Justin Allgaier, I think he's got 4 or 5 consecutive top 5 finishes. So I don't think it's an issue of Austin Hill falling off. I feel like the other guys are kind of stepping their own games up and starting to make cases for themselves. I mean, look at Sammy Smith too. Guy is going to his prom and winning races out there now. So look at Chandler Smith. He's making a strong rookie case for himself, another Truck Series guy. So and look at Brandon Jones. He's starting to get the number 9 car together. Got caught up in an incident last week. Look at Jed Burton, surprisingly going to victory lane. So again, I feel like yes, he's not racing at the torrid pace we saw at the start of the year, but at the same time, I think there's enough encouraging results that RCR can kind of can feel good about themselves about him in that 21 car at this point in time.
Yes, and then the Truck Series very quickly. They're the one league that actually has a race this weekend at North Wilkesboro. They have interesting truck season so far. Grant Effinger won a race a few weeks ago in Kansas, Christian X. So they've had a different amount of winners. Kyle Busch won a race. So I think the truck race series is wide open. Who do you think's the favorite at this point?
Honestly, at the start of the year, I said it was Carson Hocevar, but he struggled out of the gate. Although he did pick up a win, give him credit there. I think it's hard to discount the knowledge and experience, though, of Zane Smith, and you're seeing him kind of separate himself from the early going. I think you're right about the Xfinity Series in the sense that we're seeing a lot of variety in the winners this year. You know, Grant Effinger picking up one, and Christian Eck is picking up two. Hocevar winning race, Corey Heim going to victory lane in Kyle Busch's truck. So I feel that this youth revolution is good for the sport. Ty Majeski's in second place too, as a matter of fact, and you got to figure and doing so by only leading 16 laps. That's crazy. And you have to account for. And look at Tanner Gray in 8th place. Nick Sanchez, a rookie, has done really well running up the front. So you're going to see a lot of guys. You're going to see some very talented drivers in the Truck Series miss out on the playoffs, I feel. Haley Deegan's starting to get it together in the 13. Chase Purdy will contend a little bit in another Kyle Busch truck. You might see Tyler Ankrum and G. Garcia get held out. So I feel that you're going to see some very talented drivers miss out on the playoffs. But for NASCAR, it's both a blessing and the curse. It means that the next generation of drivers, you really are set up really, really well for the future.
Yes, absolutely. I think NASCAR's in a good spot right now going forward long term. All right, before we go, let's talk about our beloved teams that play at Madison Square Garden. We'll start with the Rangers. They obviously lose to the Devils in the first round. Gerard Gallant gets canned. You and I are in agreement on who we think should be the next Ranger head coach, and that is Hartford Wolfpack coach Chris Knobloch. Do you think he is the right man for the job? And I would expect him to get an interview. Wouldn't you think so?
Madison will put it this way. The closest thing we'll have to peace on Ranger Twitter was that one week during, again, the COVID year, but not really a COVID year, in 2021 when Chris Knobloch took over for David Quinn and his staff, tested positive. He comes on the bench. And for that week plus that Chris Knobloch was on the bench was the most blissful, peaceful week that you will ever see on Ranger Twitter, because, you know, the best thing you can do in your Ranger debut is beat the Flyers 9-0. And that's exactly what a Chris Knobloch-led team did. And I think he deserves a ton of credit nonetheless for the revolution, basically, he had going in Hartford. Hartford, unfortunately, eliminated last night, but they were at the bottom of the AHL. They were at the dregs of the league, the NHL's equivalent to AAA, but he got them to play their best. He did it very, very well with a very interesting, very diverse group of rookies and prospects and veterans down there. And I think, you know, the timing could not be better, because the Rangers, I feel, do not need a retread right now. Like, normally when you see a team like the Rangers, a team that, has a little trouble closing the deal when it comes to the playoffs, closing the deal when it comes to, advancing in the elite playoff rounds. Because, the reason I think Gallant left, at least Gallant was let go at least before, player exit interviews reportedly, did a number on him. He was granted a team where it was like, look, if you can't win with this team, we don't know what to tell you. But for some reason, it just feels like the Rangers do not need that coach that has, quote, been there before, that has won before. This does not seem like a time to do a retread. And Knobloch, however, he knows the system, he knows this team, he knows how to operate with Chris Drury. This is the time. The timing could not be better. You don't want to get a retread. Think outside the box. There's a perfect opportunity to do that. And with Hartford eliminated, I don't know why it hasn't happened already, to be honest. And watch this. 5 minutes after I get off the phone with you, it'll happen. But I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I just assumed that they're probably going to give Knobloch a day or two to settle down. They just got swept by the Hershey Bears, and they'll probably give him an interview maybe early next week or so. And Hartford did have a really good season. Just that I follow the AHL a little bit. I've gone to a couple of AHL games before. And I actually did watch Game 1 of the Wolfpack Bears series. The Wolfpack probably should have won Game 1, but the Bears came back from 2-0 down to beat them in overtime. I actually watched that game with a friend. And then, what was that?
I said very nice.
Yes, I did watch that game, and Hartford played very well, and I like Knobloch. I really hope he's the guy, and I completely forgot about the intern stint he had for like 2 games where he dominated the Flyers on national TV. Good times.
Well, I think yeah, it was on national TV. It was part of like NBC's. They wasn't called then. It was their Wednesday night rivalry. Oh my goodness, that seems like forever ago. But
yes,
I can't believe that was only 2 years.
And I think it was Kenny Albert on the call too. Ironically enough.
Yes, because he had just taken over NBC's top microphone from Emmerich, so it must have been him. That's right.
Yes, because Emmerich retired after the bubble, and then Kenny Albert took over, and now Kenny Albert's the lead guy on Turner, and Kenny gets to call the Stanley Cup final this year as well.
That's right. And Turner, TNT, TDS, or whatever they're called now, Warner Brothers Discovery. Their coverage has been great, by the way. I cannot stress that enough.
Oh, I think their coverage is amazing.
Oh, it's been fantastic, and I'm not just saying that because it's great to see Henrik Lundqvist back in the NHL playoffs. I love seeing that. I love when he puts the pads on in the studio and whatnot. But I think to top it all off too, I think Knobloch's stint somewhat coincided when the first games with fans back in the Garden in a year. It wasn't the first game. It was like among the first where like fans started to, where attendance started to open up more, and it was just an absolute perfect storm, and he responded in the best way possible. Because the 2021 season, like the COVID year, but not the COVID year, was interesting because I really enjoyed the divisional setup too. You seem to be playing a rival every single night. One of my favorite guilty pleasures was the de facto Canada conference they had that year. All the Canadian teams in the same division playing each other, beating each other up on a nightly basis. So if they can bring that feeling back, that'd be incredible. I feel not the whole control and lockdown stuff and whatnot. So yeah, if they can bring back the hockey aspects of it, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's see if they pull the trigger with Knobloch or not. I really think they are. All right, and then
I think so too.
The Knicks, their season ends Friday in Miami against the Heat. The Heat have an excellent chance to make the finals. They're up 1-0 on the Celtics right now. What do you think is next for this Knicks team? And what are your thoughts on them losing that pick to Dallas?
Well, first of all, I think it's not. I know the Mavericks got fined for that little stunt. They got fined 6 figures for that, but that punishment doesn't really fit the crime. The NBA should have come down harder, I feel, on Dallas. I'm not just saying that as someone in tune with the Knicks, because the entire point of the play-in tournament, which Miami has justified the existence of the play-in tournament and then some, I feel, with what they've been able to do. The entire point of the play-in tournament was to prevent teams from tanking, to put teams who are in that de facto purgatory of 7 to 10 range. It gives them something to play for. It gives them a chance, like, hey, we should kind of play for 6th place here. Hey, we should play these stars. And for Cuban to kind of spit in the face of what the play-in tournament was made for, and more or less make a mockery of the modern NBA postseason setup, deserved more than just a fine. They probably should have lost that pick. They probably should have been docked something. That was not something that fit the crime. But then again, I'm sure Mavericks fans could claim that hey, the Knicks tampered with Brunson and only lost a 2nd round pick. But that's another conversation entirely. They're 2 different penalties. They're 2 different acts. So first things first, I feel that Dallas should have gotten more for that. But again, another conversation entirely. Unfortunately, that will be used against the Knicks, though, because this is still a team that every time Steph Curry hits a three-pointer, which obviously is often, every time Steph Curry hits a three-pointer, people are reminded, hey, the Knicks could have had him, completely disregarding the fact that the Knicks were the pick after. But that's part of the Knicks tax that you and I have discussed so many times. Any simple mistake in New York is amplified 40-fold because people love to use the Knicks as a guaranteed punchline. So the thing about this Knicks season is interesting in the sense that 2/3 of the NBA, I feel, okay, maybe half, would give their left arms to have a season like the Knicks had. Because the Knicks' expectations, everyone and their mother thought their ceiling was to, host a playing game. That was a realistic goal for them, to host a playing game, to be in that purgatory, host a playing game. Jalen Brunson, shows you a little something. Jalen Brunson turned out to be a bona fide superstar, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he only got a single MVP vote. He should have been up there for more. I know that, a case for the best player from a fifth-round team isn't it's not sexy by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that he did that and forced Dallas into a path where they were, intentionally tanking games just to keep the 10th best odds at the lottery says a lot. And the fact too that the Knicks were not looking at guys like Patrick Beverley in the post trade deadline chaos. That defined more. But again, another conversation. In terms of the future for the Knicks, I think you do have to evaluate what you do going forward. Jalen Brunson is the new franchise face of this team. I don't think that's arguable at this point. And to that end, I think you kind of have to get rid of. You kind of have to part ways with Julius Randle a little bit. Knicks history can be defined by so many different eras, both good and bad. You had in the early days, you have the Willis and Clyde era. You have the Ewing era that spans from the 80s to the 90s. New Century gets a little bit rougher from there on out. You have the bittersweetness of the Carmelo era, and before that, you probably had the Stephon Marbury era. This is the Julius Randle era. What do you have to speak for it? You have this playoff victory, but can you say that Randle played, such a big role in it? I don't want to hold it against him too badly. He did play injured, so I'll give him credit there. But I think you have to kind of part ways with Randle a bit and kind of get yourself another someone to kind of complement Brunson a little bit, someone who can form a de facto big three with because, or at least a big two, because in the NBA, you are not going to go too far if you don't have two top 25 players out there, unless, of course, you're Nikola Jokic in Denver. So I feel that they will part. And you look at the rest of the roster this time around. You have to decide what you want to do with R.J. Barrett and Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin, when he was finally granted the opportunity, played a very solid month of basketball. R.J. Barrett, disappointing season, roller coaster season, mostly disappointing. But you can't say he didn't show up for the playoffs. I know you've been a defender of R.J. Barrett for a while, Nelson, and your faith was vindicated and then some. I think people were ready to pounce on him when he had that tough game. I think it was Game 4, I want to say, of the Miami series, and he kind of had a tough one in Game 6 as well. Had 11 points in the first quarter, pretty much all at the foul line, and then won a 7 the rest of the way. But the way he was able to sustain the team, able to keep pace with Brunson, be a strong complement to Brunson, I feel that he kind of secured his future moving forward. And I think it's going to be easier to trade Randle than it will be to trade Barrett in a way, because the real tough part about missing out on let's just call it 11. The tough part about missing out on Dallas's pick is that would have been such a perfect bargaining chip, a perfect sweetener. Say, okay, listen, you have to take on this $117 million extension we just gave to Randle, but at the same time, we'll throw in the 11th overall pick as well. So that's a little tough right there. And it's interesting because this is the first long-term snag of the Jalen Brunson era, the first long-term issue or snag, the first-term problem of the Jalen Brunson era, and he can do nothing about it in the sense. This is up to management to kind of work their way out because they don't have their regularly scheduled first-round pick because they went out and brought in Brunson's collegiate teammate Josh Hart. And the funny thing is, you can't say that and last draft too, they traded away. They traded away what was then, I think that might have been the 11th pick at the time too. They traded away that. They traded a chance to get Jalen Duren and to build a de facto Jalen Brunson budget. Traded away their second rounder too, all to build a de facto Jalen Brunson budget. And those were the sweeteners then. Say, take on the contract of Alec Burks, take on the contract of Nerlens Noel, take on the contract of Kemba Walker. But at the same time, we'll give you these firsts as well. And and the first you send to us, there won't be much protection on it. I think, like, for example, the one of the picks they got for Detroit for Duran was, I think it was like top 14 protected, and that came from Washington. So basically, from a Knicks perspective, you can't say that these were the wrong moves to make. Brunson has built a sustainable future for New York that has proven both sustainable and electrifying. Josh Hart, there's no doubt that the Knicks were a different team with Josh Hart in the lineup. So these objectively were not bad moves for the Knicks. But now they kind of have to work themselves out of a pickle a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how they approach this offseason.
I 100% agree with you, and I can't wait to see what transpires this offseason with the Knicks and around the NBA just in general. So, Geoff, it was an awesome time to have you on as always. We'll catch up sometime in the summer, maybe once baseball trade deadline comes up. We'll be at the All-Star break by WNBA by then, and then NASCAR will be well into the second half. So, hope you have a great night.
Ashton, you too. Keep up the great work.
Absolutely. See you soon.